Okay, so if you find this, let's start the SQL Server installation. No, it just went into here. So let's go into setup, the one with the little green arrow. And we want to say yes to allow changes. That's one reason we're doing virtual machine, is that we need those kinds of permissions. Yeah.
To this PC and on local disk?
No, I went to this folder and then do the SQL Server. Yeah, and then do the setup.
SSD setup.
Not that one, the other one. Double click it. Go to setup.
Should we go to installation?
All right, mine might be on screen somewhere. Where is my mouse? Okay. Nope, why is it taking me so long? There it is. Go already. There we go.
I play video games with you. I have endless patience.
You have endless patience. I hate Zoom, but if I don't Zoom, you won't be able to see it. And I actually prefer Zoom to resetting my resolution. All right, so a couple of things here, and this is, again, part of the afternoon class for those of you that are in there, and I think everybody but one is in there. So one of the things you can do, I'm not going to run all these, but you can do hardware and software requirements, and it'll tell you what they are, and it'll do a search to make sure your machine conforms, right? It actually has pretty minimal requirements. Like you can get by with like one processor and a gig of RAM, although it would perform like, it would be horrible on that, but it will install, right? Generally, SQL Server, particularly if you're doing the full version, wants as much RAM and as much processor as you are willing to give it. Okay. There are some security documentation. We could look at that if you want. There's release notes. Tells you how to get SQL Server data tools because it doesn't include them anymore. It checks the configuration. It allows you to do upgrade, like all of these. But basically what we want to do is these are all pre-planning stuff. And if you're doing this as part of a business or something, you should do that pre-planning. You should look at what your requirements are, what the system is. You should look at what you're going to need, make sure things are configured properly, and etc. There's a fair chance that when we do an installation, we'll have to backtrack a little too. We'll see. When I click on installation, it gives us some options. And a couple of the options, this is what we're going to use, is a new SQL Server standalone instance. You can also do a failover cluster. Anybody know what that is? Anybody want to try to explain that? What's failover? Anybody know? So if a server fails for whatever reason, it will automatically fail over to another copy, to an instance. So when you create a cluster, you're creating several SQL Server instances that are copies or clones of each other. And they'll institute things like log shipping. We'll play with some of this in the afternoon class. Things that will keep them in sync. And so if one computer fails, it automatically falls over or fails over to another computer, so that the user doesn't even know that there was a problem, right? That's how you keep computers up 24/7, right? Is you have multiple clustered instances that fail over if a computer goes down or if you need to do maintenance. It used to be that they could shut off all the computers at 3 in the morning, do maintenance, and have them up by 6. But with a global economy and a global thing, that doesn't work. So that's failover. We're not going to do that. We don't really have the hardware set up for that. You could add a node to it, and you can upgrade. So if you have an earlier version of SQL Server, you can upgrade. You can also, I know because I've done this, you can run 2008 right beside 2012, right beside 2016. You can have multiple different servers on your computer. Why one would do that? Development, maybe reasons. Particularly if you're upgrading from, say, 2008 to 2012, it's a business. On your test machine, you might want both to see if there's any problems with the upgrade, because you don't want to commit to the upgrade and have it fail or totally screw up everything. So we're going to do a SQL Server standalone installation. There's one other thing you should do. We're not going to because of just the inconvenience. So it brings up the product key, and we have a product key by default. That's because this isn't a commercial issuance of it, right? It's from DreamSpot. Which is nice, though, because then you don't have to enter the product key. It's entirely up to you. So a couple of things I want to, before you do this, it's actually a good practice. And again, we're not going to do it just because it's kind of a pain, but it's a good practice to create a couple of users in Windows or in Active Directory, however, that are specific for SQL Server, rather than what we're going to do, which is use the default user. And one of them should be an admin user, and one of them should be somebody that has less than admin privileges that can go in. Again, we should do that, but it's a pain, a single machine to constantly be shifting users, so we're going to fake it. But I'm going to do next. You have to accept the license, or your installation ends. Someday, I should read it.
Checking for updates.
Mine froze.
Yours froze. Why would it freeze?
My virtual machine froze.
Give it a moment and hopefully. The customer improvement experience is just, it'll report any errors to Microsoft. So what this does is it runs a check. The first thing I did, the one I just passed, ran a check of the system to make sure it meets all the system requirements. If it doesn't, it would fail. A failure at any point is you have to go fix it before you can proceed. So we didn't fail there. Let's not bother with the update. So now it's installing the setup files. For what it's worth, this is a lot better than it used to be. Okay, so this is a typical warning. Warnings are not fatal. Okay. The firewall doesn't have any ports open to allow external access to the SQL Server. That's what the warning is. And that's, if you were setting it up in a business, you might have wanted to dedicate a couple of ports to it. But that's all it's saying, is that basically this is only going to be accessible on this machine because there's no ports open. Yeah. Okay, so install rules. So then we need to go and set up our roles. And this, so we want a SQL Server feature installation. And we want to install SQL Server Database Engine, Analysis Service, Reporting Services, and Integration Services. So we want all of that. We do not have Power Pivot in SharePoint. If you have a SharePoint installation, you can make it interact with the SharePoint installation. And you could just do all features with defaults, but we're not going to because I want to walk through them.
Mine didn't have that last screen. It just access large features.
I don't see any features there either. Do I have features for you to select? What is your start? Let's go back. Oh, don't do upgrade, so let's do cancel. You just say yes. Go back to installation and do SQL Server standalone installation. And then go through that again. Because there's nothing to upgrade as well, there's no features. So if you don't check anything here, you don't get anything. So we want the database engine services. We want the SQL Server replication. We want full text. We want data quality services. We want analysis and native reporting services. What? No, don't go next yet. Did you do an upgrade too?
Oh, I haven't. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is going to be.
Because I lost last time.
Okay. So in the shared features, see if I want to. We do not want the reporting services for SharePoint. Do I want data quality client? I do want client tools. Client tools. Want management tools. I don't know if I need the distributed replay controller. Don't know if I need master data services. But you know what the safest thing is? This is a virtual machine. I'm going to collect everything except the SharePoint stuff. Because I know the SharePoint.
Can I question what happened if I click all?
Well, what will happen is that you'll get a whole bunch of errors back. They won't matter a whole lot, but it'll tell you it doesn't have any SharePoint connectivity. Yeah, question or you just?
Did you also click the documentation?
You know, I did click the document. No, I didn't click the documentation components. The documentation exists online. So if you want the documentation local, you can do this. Right? So basically, this is the MSDN pages. And the documentation you download is exactly the same as what's online. You only did, because I'm not entirely sure what it is. Features. So actually, I don't need that. One of the things you can do is you can click distributed replay clients. We don't need the distributed. I'm looking at the descriptions of these. So we do want those. We really don't need the SDK, but I'm going to add it. I don't know that we need backwards compatibility, so we could get rid of that.
Can we be add data after the already set up?
It isn't. I'll go through what I've checked. It isn't super crucial. You have the same things, except that you have to have the database engine. You need the SQL Server replication. You need the full text. These are for later. You know, we need the data quality services. We need the analysis services. We need the reporting services. We also need the client tools, connectivity, and the integration services. Client. Let me look at that. No, that tells me nothing.
No.
So included. I unchecked the backwards compatibility one. And I unchecked the distributed replay controller because we're not doing a cluster, and I don't think we need it for that unless we're doing that. You can always add features later. So you can run this media again, and instead of add or remove feature, not fatal if you forget something here, not that you should have had. So I'm going to do next.
By default. So can I ask a question? What a difference between program file and program file 86?
Oh,
The last one.
so it's going to install some features in the 86 folder, and some will be installed in the program. The 86 is for 32, weirdly, 86 is for 32-bit stuff. So it has some 32-bit components. Most things are 64 bits these days. They haven't actually done an operating system that's 128 base yet, have they?
No, because even with 64-bit, you have impossibly large memory space to work with already. There'd be no point in 128 yet.
Till they're holographing. Are you ready? So I'm just going to do next. In general, I would let things go to the default folders. That may not be the case if you're doing it for your business. You might really want to customize that part. We want a default instance. You guys know the difference between a default and named? It's okay if you don't, I'm just asking.
I'm still a little unclear on the difference.
All right, so the default instance is going to be named localhost. And you can access it through your machine name. All right, so it's a default, it's essentially nameless, it's named the same thing as your machine. You can have, on a single machine, you can have exactly one default. Any other instances on the same machine have to be given a name, right? MS SQL Server is another name for localhost, so that's what it is if it's a default. But you can name them. You can name them whatever you want. If you have a dozen, and if you have a network of them, you don't want a whole bunch of local hosts, right? So you want to name them. You want to give them whatever name. And one of the things that we may do, I don't know, that we'll probably add another instance of SQL Server, because one of the very last things we want to do in the afternoon is we're going to try to replicate log files between servers, and you need more than one server to do that. Yeah.
So the instance thing, is it kind of similar to like IIS site names or?
Well, they're a little bit different in that IIS, you have, I mean, they're all sites, they all reside under IIS. Generally, each instance of SQL Server is a totally independent instance. It has its own data engine. It'll have its own reporting services. They do share some tools, like they'll share the same management studio. So there was a thing back there about shared. A lot of the x86 stuff you were asking about goes to the shared folder. So there are some graphical tools that they share, but the instances are totally independent of each other. Does that make sense?
But just thinking as far as name resolution.
Yeah, probably, because there is a local host in IIS. That can be confusing because we're going to, when we do reporting services, the database will be localhost, but the IIS will be localhost also. So, and you don't actually have to have IIS running, which is weird, to do the reporting services. All right. So basically, the other thing it'll do is it'll show you any names of existing ones here, so that you don't accidentally name something the same. So I'm going to do next. This installation, by the way, has improved enormously over the past few years. It's still a little complex, but it used to be nightmarishly complex. It's been simplified a lot. All right, so these are different components. I'll talk about them this afternoon some, but these are different components of SQL Server. There's the agent, which we'll play with later. That actually is something that allows you to create schedules and automate things and time things. There's the database engine, which is where all the data is. It's the part that allows you to query, to store the data and to query the data. There's the analysis services, which we will use in this class when we do the data analysis and the business analysis. The reporting services. All the report elements are stored in SQL Server instances also, right? There are servers that keep track of servers and, et cetera. If you think of the cloud is nothing but a bunch of databases keeping track of databases and virtual machines on different things. There's the integration services. This is the full text filter. It gives you some tools. SQL Server browser, I'm not entirely sure what it does. I'll look it up. It's not one I usually teach. But it is. These startup types, all right, if it's manual, that means you have to go manually start it. If it's automatic, that means it starts automatically when your operating system is started. So if it reboots your operating system, it would reboot with the operating system. So automatic means that it automatically starts. The browser is always disabled. I'll need to research that a little bit. Disabled means that you can't even start it manually unless you go in here and enable. Does that make sense? So those are different parts of SQL Server. SQL Server is a really powerful, complex database. Have you guys installed MySQL? It can be more frustrating, but it's somewhat simpler. The main thing that can be frustrating about it is what the mistake I've sometimes made is forgetting my root password by the time I finished the installation. All right, so this is, we're doing some configuration here. I would leave it as in Windows for now. We'll talk about this later, but Windows authentication means that it can only be accessed through a Windows account. Mixed mode will allow you to access it from SQL Server accounts. We will eventually change it to mixed mode. But right now, I'm just going to leave it at Windows, and I'm going to add the current user. That means that the current Windows user will be the administrator. In general, that is not best practice. You should have, as I said, created a new user for this. So they had to log in on purpose to access it. And then there should have been like 2 users, one for full access and one for kind of good but not full administrative access. You'll all be Steve. If you create a user later, we're going to have to add you as an administrator later from the Steve account. I don't know why he does that instead of saying student, or why my name on these. All right, so we're going to do next. And this is for the multidimensional and data mining and all of those kind of things. And again, we want to add the current user. It must be a fairly typical thing to do that because it's a button. I think in development it's okay to do this, but again, I'd be a little bit careful doing it if you were setting it up for a company. If you want, you could look at data directories, and it shows you where things are going to go. Couple of things about this, we'll talk about it some later. I would not, when you're developing for a company, setting it up, I would not use the default directories for most of this stuff, particularly the log file. In the backup directory, they should be on separate disks at a minimum, right? Probably a different folder too, but definitely on separate disks. It does you no good at all to have your backup on the same disk as your actual files, because they will, if the disk crashes, you're just SOL. Same with the log file. If the disk crashes, you can't. The log file can be used to recover everything that isn't in the backup, and if it's on the same disk, it's useless. So they should not go on the same disk. That being said, I'm going to leave them there. Yeah. Question?
Would you want to also have the data on a different disk than the OS for performance reasons?
Probably. Now, I don't know. So if you were doing, typically if you were setting up a SQL Server, it would be on Windows Server as opposed to Windows 10. And typically it's set up on a core instance of the server, which means no GUI. So you might put your data there, but typically it'd also be in a RAID system. So you'd have your data files spread across the disks. You can also, when we get to databases, you can direct data files then when you create the database. And you can split it up into multiple files if you want.
So to some extent, you can cheat with replication.
Yeah, I mean, if you're replicating, so wherever the data files are, there's some risk. Again, if RAID minimizes the risk to some extent. RAID is just like a set of disks and you strip, so there's a bit of replication there. And then replicating it to other machines and etc. The main thing is that the log, now for performance, you'd have to test whether it'd be better on another disk or not. But the log and the backup should definitely not be on the same disk. You can back up to Azure now. I don't know that we'll do that because I don't want everyone backing up to my account. But so questions on that? Generally, I'm just going to leave them. I just wanted to mention them. So now we have install and configure, and you can then do it yourself manually if you want, but I'm going to let it configure. Because that's a pain, configuring all your report databases and stuff. Now we're almost to the part where you can take a break. All right, so this just basically says, is this really what you want to do? All right, this is your last confirmation screen. And then you click install. And this can take anywhere from 10 minutes to 45 minutes. It's quicker than it used to be, but we are in a virtual. So. And it has moments of speed. Actually, I'd be surprised if it does it really fast. But typically, it slows down after a bit. It doesn't. It usually takes me about 15, 20 minutes. So if you want to break, we may call this, when we get this installed, we might call it good for the day, I mean for the morning, and then in the afternoon we can do the rest of it.
How about this break and we can buy a 12 o'clock?
What?
We can buy a 12 o'clock.
Well, so I'm saying let's finish this and then we can come back at 1 o'clock.
Ooh.
Yeah, I'm giving you a good lunch.
So what are you buying? Just
Yeah.
kidding.
I have a peanut butter sandwich I could share.
With all of us?
Yes,
Yeah,
so
That's a big
generous.
sandwich.
Well, you get a little tiny bit. As I said, this will take a little while.
It's not really completed, is there another step?
No, once it's done, we should be okay. And then the next thing to do, and it only takes like about 5 minutes, but we could do it this afternoon, or if you want, would be to install the data tools.
So we're going on break after this finishes.
When this finishes, you can go on break for lunch. I suppose you could go on break
You're saying it's gonna
anyway.
take 40 minutes?
I hope it doesn't take 40 minutes. I said it could take anywhere from 10 minutes to 40. But you certainly could take a break and then check on it in a bit. I want to start today at 1. Normally, we'll probably go a little later in this class and start the other one a little later, but there are a couple of people in the next class that are not in this class. So, and that means we have to set up all this stuff for them too.
Why would anybody be in one of these classes and not the other?
I'm not sure. I was thinking when I looked at the roster, there's always the case that there's 1 or 2 people that aren't in both. I was thinking I should make them co-required. I mean, you could do the admin without wanting to do this. That makes some sense. I suppose you could do this without wanting to do the admin. But the tools, once the installation is set up, it doesn't matter anymore, actually. So, does anybody have any questions about all of this before lunch or that? So in the afternoon, the assignment for this is basically just to take a screenshot of your installed instance of SQL Server. Don't delete these files because, as I said, we may want to add a second instance for replication later. I don't know that I want to do that today. Maybe we could do that while the other do their first installation. The other thing we have to do today is set up the actual databases, which is really only takes a few seconds.
We're just getting them off GitHub again.
GitHub, and then the Metro Alt is the files are in Canvas again. Other than that, it's just watching the green lines.
Well, it's exciting. As exciting as one of those laser shows.
Yeah. It's actually moving pretty fast. At least mine is. It looks like you guys are too. The really slow install is usually Visual Studio. Yeah.
We're throwing that in this VM too?
Just the data tools. The data tools don't take so long. The full Visual Studio, yeah, is huge. This one, after we're done, will be fairly huge too.
Is the data tools a pretty simple installation aside from just how big it is?
Yeah, it's actually a simpler installation than this. It doesn't ask as many questions, it just does it. If you don't have Visual Studio, it does install a Visual Studio shell, but it doesn't take, usually it only takes a few moments. Because it doesn't install all the programming languages and all the compilers. It just installs the SSIS and the reporting services and the business intelligence.
Will we be needing anything for the next class in the VM?
So the only thing, once the database is in will be okay. As I said, there are a couple of people that are going to have to get set up. But maybe we can do that while we talk about some other stuff they can watch it go. It might be done fairly soon. Yeah, this is actually an assignment for the next class. But this class can't run without it either, so.
Oh, I see.
In the, yeah. Yeah, if my, I was on it morning. Yeah.
I think it's, at least mine is heading more towards the 10 minute than the 40.
And it's just gonna stay like that for an hour.
It'll hang here for a while. The green bar isn't perfectly timed with the actual install. So, but it doesn't take forever after this. It just takes a little while. I'm tired. Got out of the habit of getting up early. And then this morning I woke up at 4:30 and something happened to my clock, so it's at 7:16. So I thought I was really late. And so I got dressed and everything went out to the kitchen, and so it was only 4:30 in the morning.
That's pretty good.
But then I didn't get back to sleep, so I'm kind of. And I would have actually had to leave about 5:30, so. But I usually get up at 5 to do that. So today I did because I wanted to be here to look at this stuff before class. Yeah, it takes me a while. So I caught the 7:12 train. Got here about 8:30. So. On a good day, I can sleep till 6:30. That's if I'm gonna, like tomorrow, I can take the last train in. I don't though. Usually by the time I got to the train, I've had 2 cups of coffee. And it's actually a good reading time. I'm much more likely to sleep on the way home. Okay, so I don't know how long it'll hang here before it's done, but it'll eventually finish. So we're going to use the Management Studio mostly to talk to this, and just want to say that in the professional world, it's probably more likely to be a command line. Yeah, it's faster, more efficient. And typically they install it onto a server with no GUI. Although you can, at Microsoft at one time I saw, I don't know if they allow people to search their data anymore. But we had a tour of it. They had rack after rack of computers, literally huge racks of computers. At the end of every aisle, they had one computer that had the SQL Server Management Studio. That was basically a graphical interface for all of the computers down that row. So they did have some graphical attack, but I think if you're at a station and you wanted to access a particular server, it's faster to go in by command line. The only trouble with command line is you really have to be a good typist. Which I'm not always. I hate on the command line. I press the command, get all sorts of error messages, and realize I left out a character. Typing problem. finish. So you're done? So some people are finishing.
I'm still stuck.
So program, I think it's 10 part with the actual installation very well.
After we close, should we go, or are we gonna download the?
No, you can go. We'll do the others this afternoon.
So once we done those,
So once you're done, you can just, if you want, just go to lunch. You can leave it up if you want. You can,
after 1 p.m. you say.
yeah, 1 p.m. So you got about an hour.
So what class did you say?
That's the 226.
That should have been 226.
You didn't, so you're one of the didn't do the 226.
No, I haven't.
Okay, that's fine. Then you don't have to come back at 1. So, but you should shut down then.
So you've done for this 2 4.
Yeah, no, since you're not coming back, let's do one other thing before you shut down. So,
So actually we have a video. Easy to get a video.
yeah, there's a video.
So remember.
So one of the things, what you don't want in here are any X's, any red X's. Because if that's the case, things won't work. I have all greens, so that's good. Then you can close this. And you can actually close this. I'm going to file Explorer. Actually, let's do all apps. That's what I want to do. Okay, so we want to go down to and you'll see that there's all sorts of new, which we will look at. Most of these are configuration. And there's also center, database. I hope, yeah, there's the management studio. Confirming that there are all sorts of folders. Most of those folders are just for one time, you know, for going in and configuring things. Most of them we will ignore.
Only 14 changing.
Not a lot. Most of the recent updates in SQL Server have get more compatible with Azure, which won't affect what we're doing much.
What is the class between ITC24 and ITC26?
226 is mostly admin, so taking care of the service, installing,
Okay, so
setting
24.
like importing stuff.
To take any in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine. I don't automatically. That's local. You're all set for now.
Oh. Hi, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh. 226 not offered. Just close. Next quarter, which is 4 quarters.
No, it's not offered till next summer.
What? So I have to take it, otherwise I don't get it.
Yes, maybe you should take it.
Hey, Steve, what?
Oh, so what you could do is just go down into the, yeah, I've got the management studio, that's fine.
Okay.
So this afternoon, we will if you really have to have the 226 and you can't take it this time, we could probably.
So can we just go now?
You could register.
It looks like I have to take a next.
That would be 4, yeah.
Just if you have some management studio. I think I can register mine. Yeah, you do.
So it's up to you if you want to leave these up. It should be fine to leave them up, I would think, if you're coming back.
So we can just be back here by 1.
Yeah. And if I'm going to leave here in a minute, but if anybody, anybody is the last person out, close the door. I'll reopen it as needed, but I just don't want to leave the room empty. So if you can't hang around for this one, we could do a directed study.
No, I want to drop the other one because this one is a lot of people.
What is it?
Minutes.
Is it something you need?
Yeah, I have to. But this class offer every quarter.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, just drop this one,
And
take
take
that
that
one.
one. That might
So
be
I
a
don't have the
good,
same price, I mean, same tuition, I don't have to change anything.
but if you can, I'd like to do it.
Yeah, I go downstairs, talk to them, see.
Okay.
So can I leave my?
You should be able to leave it fine.
Okay, great. I'll be right back.
All right, we'll see you in a
Okay,
minute.
madam.
Yeah.
I'll be right back, thanks. Thank you, madam.
No, no problem.
Drink like 2 weeks.
Need something mentally stimulating.